Upbringing is a purposeful and specially organized influence of the educator on the child. The essence of upbringing is practiced transforming activity aimed at changing consciousness, attitudes, mental state, knowledge, skills, mode of activity, or other aspects of the personality of the educated person. Usually, upbringing is aimed at the transfer of social experience and common human culture, at the organization of productive activities and a healthy lifestyle, as well as at creating conditions for the development of personality, helping in communication and leading in case of difficulties. Upbringing can be successful if it's associated with learning, the acquisition of knowledge and skills, if it is carried out in the system and the development of interacting elements. The main goal of upbringing are the expected changes in the personality of school children under special educational influence. The essence of upbringing lies in purposeful transformation of social experience into personal experience, introducing a person to all the wealth of human culture. The upbringing process requires a certain systematically carried out work, not only in the classroom, but also during excursions in extracurricular work and activities. All elements of upbringing in teaching biology are closely related to each other. For example, upbringing of the worldview is associated with environmental education, value attitudes toward the living world and the environment, labor upbringing with a culture of work and aesthetics, ethical upbringing with an ecological one, with work in esteem, and spiritually with patriotic and civic humanistic, cultural and ecological. One of the most important causes of modern environmental disasters should be considered the ecological illiteracy of the population, the inability to foresee the consequences of their invention in nature. That is why in recent decades, the school has increased attention to environmental education issues. The natural history course provides the most favorable opportunities for this. Environmental education is a continuous process of training, upbringing, and personal development aimed at forming a system of scientific and practical knowledge and skills, value orientation, behavior, and activity that ensure a responsible attitude to natural and social environment and health. The basis for highlighting the content of environmental education at school is based on the specific concept of living organisms and its connection with the environment. On this basis, school children can develop an understanding of nature as an interconnected value that is sensitive to human interaction. Moral attitudes toward the impossibility of causing damage to natural objects, including those of their own kind. Initial experience in environmental protection. The ecological content is aimed at the formation of relationships that are an amalgamation of knowledge, feelings, and functions and actions. It includes scientific and cognitive, value, normative, and activity aspects. The scientific and cognitive aspects of nature management allows us to perceive nature as a whole, where objects of inanimate and animate nature are closely interconnected. The value aspect, sustainable, the need to protect natural objects, a complex of moral, aesthetic, cognitive, practical, sanitary, and hygienic and other values and their importance in human life. The normative aspect affects the norms of human behavior in nature, introduces them, reteaches them to act in accordance with them. The activity aspects provides for the assimilation of the relevant knowledge of norms and rules that makes it possible to provide real assistance to plants and animals to reproduce natural resources. These aspects underlie and definition of the main objectives of environmental education, which require to provide to school children that everything is interconnected in nature, to help understand why a person should know natural connection in order not to violate them, because a violation by people of natural ties entails negative consequences, both for nature and for the person himself. To teach to build your behavior in nature based on knowledge about the relationships in it and an appropriate assessment of the possible consequences of their actions. The education function of teaching biology follows from the very essence of these science, since it reflects the laws of the development of life, the variety of forms of living organisms. On this slide, you can see a table with the types of educ or upbreeding with a short characteristics. The first, formation of a worldview. Depending on the nature of the philosophical basis, the worldview can be scientific and religious. Scientific philosophy does not replace individual disciplines, but equips them with methods of cognition, and the theory of thinking occupies a key position in scientific knowledge. Philosophy unites with science the desire to build knowledge in a theoretical form, to logically provide their conclusions. Next, moral and aesthetic educ, or upbreeding. Fostering a sense of godness and a sense of a beauty, aesthetic, are extrajudicially linked, so communication with objects of nature develops feeling of beauty and human morality. Moral ideas are determined by the human attitude of a person to a person. Next, environmental culture. The aggravation of contradiction in the interaction of society and nature contributed to the development of a complex ecology, which covers the socio-economic, natural, scientific, technical, medical, legal, and moral aspects of environmental environmental problems. A new array of pedagogical theory and schools practice has emerged, environmental education and upbreeding of school children, which aims to form a responsible attitude of school children to nature, supplant consumer approaches to nature with a rational attitude, a conviction of the need to preserve the natural environment and creative creation. Next, polytechnism in school biology. Studying biology, the child must get an orientation in the technology of all spheres of production, both material and spiritual, try his hand at solving empirical, conceptualization, theoretical, and constructive problems. And last, labor educ or upbreeding. Labor education is based on polytechnic education, labor and vocational training and vocational guidance of school children. Labor and polytechnic training of school children should be carried out in accordance with the modern level of development of science and technology, taking into account the needs of society, the attributes and inclination of school children to educate children so that the work becomes their primary need, a vital necessity. It is necessary to form an idea of health as a particularly comprehensible standard, as well as pay attention to the physical development of children.